Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Lots going on around the NBA for us to dive into. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, over on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA, joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, let me tell you, I am so upset right now over the fan vote for the AllStar returns, those first returns. I am angry. Something needs to be done about this. Something must happen here. This did not turn into a list of players ranked based on their total skill level. This is not a list based on merit. And I am shocked at this outcome.
Yeah, as am I. I mean, well, what a stunning development. The first round of voting, especially, is heavily swayed towards big market players and not even star players. Sometimes guys who play 15 minutes a night are being voted into the All-Star game. We all know this was it, right? This was the only votes that happened. These are the guys who are all in, and that's just life, and that's how we're all going to have to live. I mean, what a ridiculous firestorm it was, and it's so predictable too, because it happens every single year with this. And in case our snark's not heavy enough, the first All-Star voting results came in and people absolutely lost their minds all over social media as far as, player X shouldn't be there and this guy doesn't even play, and why is it all Lakers and Warriors and Nets and Knicks and all these things. And look at how fancy we are now. You pulled it right up and everything. So
even putting them on
there it is. I mean, who didn't expect Austin Reeves to feature heavily in the All-Star Western Conference backcourt voting? I'm absolutely stunned.
Well, and that's just it. People see, Jason Tatum right now, the favorite to win the MVP, right? Ranking fourth. So he wouldn't even be a starter based on this fan. But it's not just, this is only 50% of the vote in terms of determining. And this is the first returns. That's it. This isn't even final. This is only 50%. You've got the media, you've got players counting for the other 50%. So, but this is by no means set in stone at all. But then when you look and see, okay, Jason Tatum's not even a starter on this list, people get upset. And you see
that's one I can't even argue with either, like too much, because he's behind Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid.
Yeah,
so
one of those players has to be fourth, and whichever one is, that fan base is justifiably angry.
Yep,
because none of them should be on the bench there. But then you've got like Derrick Rose being ahead of Darius Garland and being on the list. You've got Austin Reeves being on the list, and I love Austin Reeves, but he's ninth on the list. You've got Russell Westbrook ahead of Damian Lillard and Devin Booker. I mean, you have all kinds of. But this is what happens with the fan vote. Because here's the thing: people get upset, but the fan vote, this return is not meant to be a list of the top players in order based on their quality. That's not what you're asking for. This is like ordering a boat, and then it arrives and you get upset that it's not a car. This isn't what you asked for. And so people get all up in arms about it. Look, that's not this isn't a list based on the quality of the player. That's not what this is at all. This is just based on fan votes. And yes, it tends to skew towards big markets because more people, more votes. That's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things too, where I'm glad you broke it down a little bit. There's going to be, I think, 3 more of these that'll come out. So we'll continue to see, what happens generally too is you do get some people who look and be like, all right, we can't stand for player X being this high. We've all got to get in there and start voting. And then sometimes it goes the other way too, where it's like, well, this is silly. I want to be involved and saying I helped vote Joe Clown Shoes into the All-Star game too. So that turns into a bunch of goofiness. But in the end, it's 50% of the vote. Then the other 25% or 25 of the other 50% goes to the players and 25% go to the media. And what I said on Twitter today is, if you think the fan vote is silly, you should see the player vote. I have been in locker rooms in the lead up to when the players' votes are due, and it's seen players with their ballot in front of them saying, hey, you vote for me and I'll vote for you, okay? And it's 2 guys who play a total of 15 minutes off the bench in blowouts. Like it's nothing. It's guys don't take it serious there either. The media votes made up of a panel of, it's somewhere between 50 and 100. I can't remember. Media voters. people yell about that because they're like, oh, this person doesn't even watch, the Western Conference. They
Yep.
go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. How would they even know? And those kind of things. And that turns into a whole other circus as well with the way that goes. So the reality is no one's ever going to be really happy with this. The All-Star game, in my opinion, it's for the fans. We don't get crazy people voted into the All-Star game that wouldn't make it anyway. People keep saying, well, what about Andrew Wiggins last year?
Yep.
He was probably going to make the team anyway.
Just maybe not as a starter.
Not as a starter, sure. And it doesn't really matter who starts these games. No one ever goes back and says this person was a 12-time All-Star starter. No, they were 12-time All-Star. So as long as you get the right-ish 24 guys, I don't really care. It doesn't, it's not going to be the end of the world to me one way or the other if one of them happens to start that wouldn't have otherwise.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's just, if the All-Star game was, I think it's baseball where like that determines home field advantage for the World Series or something. Like if there was something like that on okay, I get people being a little bit more, upset about it, but that's not the case. It's for fun. Sure, there's charity money involved, so that that's something. But this is mostly for fun for the fans, and so I just don't think you can get too upset over these returns. And just the response was so loud to this vote. People were so upset. I'm like, man, we forget every year that this always happens every single year, and that every year people are shocked and surprised when it does. It's crazy.
It also makes me laugh too that like you see, like for example, I'm going to use your team.
Yeah,
we have seen people kill Russell Westbrook for the entirety of the season. Of he's not good and blah 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 and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And 500,000 people voted for him still. Like it's, and some of that is, hey, I can say bad things about my guy, but I'm still going to vote for him because I'd rather have him in there than any non-Laker anyway. And that's just kind of how it goes. I mean, teams they'll send out tweets where it's, hey, vote our 5 guys in, and it's 5 players auto-loaded. So when all you have to do is click the link, go to the link, and press submit, and it's 5 starters. And sometimes it's like, what, really? Your 5th starter who starts but plays 25 minutes a night and averages 4 points a game, like he should be in the All-Star game? There's a lot of foolishness going on with it. So, but again, it's for the fans, and if that's who they want to see, then so be it. That's who they want to see. I'm not gonna get worked up over it and angry because it's probably not going to matter in the end.
All right. I do have something for you to actually get worked up over.
Let's go.
We have a trade.
Yeah, we do.
Let's go. This is now, what an opening shot for trade season.
Huge.
This is a balance of power shift in the NBA. Noah Vonleh traded to the Spurs. No, look, it is good just to see something go on, right? But Keith, this is your team, the Celtics. What's the thought process here? Why are they doing this? What's going on?
Yeah, for Boston, the idea is primarily to create a roster spot. They were likely going to waive Noah Vonleh or Justin Jackson, if not both of them anyway. What happens in 2 days from now on Saturday, players who aren't waived by the end of the day Saturday, their contracts will become fully guaranteed. The fully guaranteed date, because I've had this question from a handful of people, like I thought it was January 10th. Mm-hmm. It is, but in order to have your deal not become fully guaranteed, you have to clear waivers before that. So that means you have to be waived on the 7th. So technically it's the 10th. Functionally, it's the 7th. So we're going to see a handful of teams. There's about 30-ish players or so in that range who are on non-fully guaranteed deals right now that we're going to see decisions made on them. Some of them complete no-brainers. Guys like Jose Alvarado, right? Like, of course, he's going to have his deal become fully guaranteed. I'm just trying to cherry pick another one out of this. A guy like Lamar Stevens for the Cavs, he started a lot this year. He'll have his deal become fully guaranteed as well. But what will happen with the rest of those guys is there's going to be some decisions to be made within that. And what happens here is if you're the Celtics and you're a tax team, they were about $65 million for a tax bill. That's the amount they're over the tax plus the penalties in that situation. So what's going to happen here is by trading Noah Vonleh, not simply waiving him and eating the guaranteed portion of his contract, they save about $7 million off their tax bill,
Not
but
bad.
trading him to the Spurs. For the Spurs side, Boston's going to send them enough actual cash so that when the Spurs owner is writing out his payroll checks, which I know that's not how it really works, right? There's this whole computer system that's going to stamp
Yes.
his name, but we know, right? But when
It's
he's
not
signing,
1983 anymore. Yes.
yeah, exactly. There's not some dude. There's not Scrooge with his big ledger, writing 10 cents or whatever, 10
Right.
pounds. I don't know. But it's when they're doing their payroll, they're gonna have to pay Vonleh a couple days' salary because reportedly, according to Woj, they're gonna waive him too. Celtics are presumably sending enough cash to the Spurs to cover what they're going to eat in the Vonleh, probably plus a little bit because it's basically a thanks for saving us $7 million. We'll do that, and then the Spurs though get to count his full amount of his full guaranteed amount, which will be about like 1 million ish in range. That'll count for them towards the salary floor, which they're still about $16 million under before bringing in Vonleh. So this is kind of one of those. This trade doesn't really mean anything basketball wise. Vonleh, he was in Boston's rotation early in the year, but then Luke Cornett got healthy. Rob Williams got healthy. Vonleh fell out. He was only playing garbage time minutes now. They don't really need him. The open roster spot going into trade season or into buyout season, more likely for the Celtics. That's far more valuable, and you save some money. And now what Brad Stevens can do with the Celtics ownership is say, hey, that $7 million, I need 1 million of it back, 2 million of it back because we want to sign player X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And that's where it'll go. So in the end, they'll come out a little bit ahead, but Boston will fill that roster spot. They will not go in to the end of the regular season with only 14 players under contract. They will wrap up, head to the playoffs with a full roster.
So this is a purely financial move, but it's just, well, I guess not purely, because it does give you that open roster spot to play with, but
Sure.
primarily a financial move where the Celtics are saving some money, the Spurs are taking on some money and getting paid a little bit of extra money in exchange for doing that. And plus they're getting close to that salary floor. So,
and having the Spurs and Pacers both sitting so far under, wouldn't be surprised if you see them pop up a couple more times between now and that guarantee date on Saturday of eating a couple other deals for players because they're still both sitting on roughly 30 million in cap space that they can play with. And if they're not thinking, yeah, there's a deal out there to eat a bigger contract or to take a really imbalanced trade back or whatever it is, we might as well eat some salary. And what will happen is reason Vonleh it's so little, so Celtics are paying them in cash. If it was a bigger deal, if this was a $10 million player, probably get a second round pick out of it or a couple of them. That tends to be more at the trade deadline that'll happen. But for now, for Boston, it was, hey, rather than eat this guy's guarantee in a couple of days, we can move him to San Antonio. Let's go. We should say Gorgie Jang got waived or will get waived by the Spurs to open the roster spot for them to bring in Vonleh. And we'll see. The Spurs may turn right around and re-sign him and bring him back. He's very, very popular in the organization.
Yeah, so that could certainly happen there, but hey, it's an early move here.
Yep.
Maybe we see some more things happening as we get into January. Speaking of which, let's jump to the Detroit Pistons. Their asking price for Bojan Bogdanovic. Now we had heard through the Lakers lens that the Pistons were asking for an unprotected future first for Bogdanovic. You and I both discussed this and why we wouldn't do that. According to Jake Fisher, the asking price, and this does not specify protected or not, but the asking price now for Bogdanovic, a sharpshooter, is a first-round pick plus a young player or the equivalent draft capital. So it's not just a first. It's a first plus a young player and the equivalent draft capital. That's what the Pistons are looking for. Also listed some teams that are interested in Bogdanovic. The Mavs, the Lakers were some of them. There were a few others off the top of my head. It was Suns and Cavs as well that were interested in trading for him. That's a pretty high price tag, but it doesn't hurt to ask for these types of, and that's kind of where we're at in trade negotiations right now.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on here. One is Bogdanovic, 49, 42, 89 shooting splits, 21 points per game. These are not empty numbers. This is not a guy scoring 20 plus points per game on 35% shooting from the floor. He's getting it done night in, night out with very little help around him. He's played every night. He's been there. He's played 40 games for them, 31 minutes per night. He's a little older, but I think if you're the Pistons, because it was funny, I had somebody ask me, like, do Detroit just do the equivalent of flipping a house here? Like they paid
Right.
less for this guy. Now they're going to get, way more than what they paid. But what they did was they signed him to an extension. And now I think he's more valuable
Hmm.
as a trade piece because you're not just trading for him for the rest of this year. You're getting him signed for 2 more years, and that second year is mostly non-guaranteed. It's only 2 million of the 20+ million guaranteed in that second season of that extension. So you could have him rest of this year, all of next year, and the year after that if you wanted to. So I think for the Pistons side, it is, yeah, let's ask for a lot. I think it's also a sign of, hey, we'll trade him if you really want to bowl us over with an offer. But if you don't, we're happy to keep him
Hmm.
because they intend to be competitive next year. That's the sign they've been kind of sending everybody is we're going to get our guys back. We're going to be ready to go. We're going to be a competitive team a year from now. So I think for Detroit, it is, hey, here we go. Like if it's the rest of this year, you know what? We can shut him down pretty easy. We
Yeah.
can come up with, a reason he can't play later in the season and off we'll go. So yeah, I think it is really, really going to be interesting to see how this goes for them the rest of the year.
By the way, I should note I didn't put this in our show notes, but Marvin Bagley will be reevaluated in 6 weeks. Just while we're on the topic of the Pistons, repaired a fracture of the third and fourth metacarpals in his right hand from Mark Stein.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sucks, right? Like that
Yeah.
part is brutal for them because again, they'd settled on that three big rotation with Bagley, Stewart, and Jalen Duren, and it was going to be let's play that through. And now you're going to lose the ability to see what that looks like. And Bagley's a guy who they signed to a 3-year contract, so this was not just a he's leaving at the end of the season anyway kind of situation. This was a guy they saw as part of the group that they're building.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's tough for the and again, we talked about this with Cade. I mean, this is you're losing that year to figure out what you've got, that year of development. I know Bagley's been in the league for a few years longer, but still, you had a chance to have him with your young team playing out there, developing that chemistry. And so you lose that for the next 6 weeks or so. That can definitely throw you out of rhythm and out of sync. You don't want this to just be a throwaway season if you're
No.
Detroit. Now, even if you do wind
Right.
up moving Boyan, you don't want this to be a throwaway season. You want this to be a season of development, knowing you're not going to make the playoffs or anything like that. But you don't want it to be just throw your hands up, let's lose as much as we can. You want to start making progress towards something here. And having all these injuries is certainly going to be a hurdle that you're going to have to try to overcome in that process.
Yeah, anytime you're going to be what I like to call naturally bad, which is just you're just not going to be a good team, which is I know there were a lot of people like they could be a sleeper playing team and
Mm-hmm.
all that sort of stuff. But I never fully bought in to that. With the Pistons, I thought they were still at least a year or two away. Anytime you're going to be naturally bad and you have injuries to key guys, it starts to become a lost season. So that's where anything you can do to kind of fight against that is valuable to let's go because you still got Jaden Ivey out there.
Mm-hmm.
You're still next time we could go, let's figure out what Killian Hayes is. We've got Sadiq Bey. We've got Jalen Duren. Let's really try to get the most out of these guys versus just rolling the ball out and losing by 20 every night. Because chances are we're probably going to lose more often than not anyway. We don't need to get killed to do that. We can play competitive games for the most part.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. The Mavs and Christian Wood have opened extension talks. Now we heard earlier in the week, we heard about the Mavs wanting to do a 2-year deal. Christian Wood can get up to 4 years, and it was 77 million.
Yeah.
Mavs looking at a shorter deal than that. Do you think they find middle ground here and get something done, or is this the kind of thing where Christian? Do you even want? I guess that's maybe the bigger question. If you're Christian Wood, do you want a 4-year deal at 77 million, or are you looking for more money than that? In that case, you might be more open to a short-term deal and then hit free agency again later on. What should his approach be?
Yeah, the length is the interesting part here for Christian Wood. He's not 25. I think he's 27 years old. So that starts to become a little bit different for him. I don't know that I necessarily want to, be in a spot for him. And he's 27.
Yep.
Christian Wood is. So I would probably, if you're 25 or under, yeah, give me a couple years because I've still got a couple more deals in me. Let's go. At his age, it's probably more of a, unless you're not sure about the fit and the situation, then maybe you're willing to do shorter. But I would basically say, hey, the floor is 4 years, 77 million, the max you can give me right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to go to that, let's just keep playing then the way it is, and we'll see where it goes. And that's where it could be risky for Dallas. They just played this game with Jalen Brunson. Now, Christian Wood is a more signable guy for them to some extent, but you're in a spot where you lost Jalen Brunson because you didn't want to pay up early. Now, they were very limited in what they could extend him for, but you let it go to free agency, you lost the player. Let it go to free agency and you lose Christian Wood, especially if he keeps playing the way he's been playing. He's been playing great, especially since getting that starting group. Christian Wood and his reps may be looking at and saying, you know what? 4 years, 77 million is not enough. Like we're feeling, 90 million, and you can't give that to us now, but somebody's going to give it to us in the off season. So we're willing to hold out.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. You could get there. And it's, I think you are like 27. If it's a 4-year deal, you can say, okay, if he plays this well for the remaining 4 years, 31, he's going to get another deal after. But the problem is at that point, 31 teams are going to say, well, but he's 31, right?
And he's a center.
Yeah. And so that starts to become a detriment for you. And it might even be a little bit of a factor if you take a 2-year deal. If you're Christian Wood, if you say, well, I'm not getting the money exactly that I want, let me go shorter term deal. Then you're 29. Teams are going to say, well, he's about to turn 30. We don't want to commit to him for a 4-year deal to get to 33. And you just run into problems. So he needs to get the deal that he wants right now. Like, this is his time to strike at 27 years old and get the right deal. If he's comfortable with 4 years, 77, and the Mavs are willing to do it, I think that'd be a good deal potentially for both sides. But I tend to be more risk averse in situations like this. If he thinks that he's going to get 100 million somewhere or something like that, it might be worth it just to wait. But personally, if it's me, if I'm advising him, if 4 years, 77 million is on the table, I think it's probably close enough where it's not worth risking some sort of catastrophic injury over the rest of the season and just getting it done. But again, what we've heard is the Mavs will only go 2 years. And if that's the case, that's where I'm probably going to say, well, let's wait and see what plays out this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. With you on that. If people are really interested in a lot more longer, deeper thoughts from me on all things Christian Wood and his contract, I wrote first spot track in the most recent version of our next contract series. It was all about Christian Wood, so you can check that out over there.
All right, let's talk a little bit. I'm not even going to spend a ton of time on this, but Howard Beck, always noteworthy whenever he mentioned something. Fantastic job, and he threw out there that he'd heard some rumblings from other teams around the league that the Lakers maybe had a mandate to not trade their picks. That was kind of what was out there, that they're not going to trade them. And essentially, there's really two ways to take this. Either you take it at face value, and yes, they've been told by the powers that be, you'd have to imagine ownership there, said don't trade the picks. Period. Don't think we've got enough this year. Don't trade the picks. We're going to hang on to them until the summer, and then let's go from there. That's possible. Also possible that in negotiations with other teams are coming away with the impression that they don't want to trade the picks because they're kind of driving a hard bargain. We saw the same thing with Kevin Durant, right, over the summer, where teams eventually walked away from negotiations with the Nets saying, well, the Nets are asking for so much, we don't think they even want to trade him. And so then that started to get out there and become a thing. So that's the other possibility. But nonetheless, there's some rumblings out there that maybe the Lakers are simply operating as though they won't trade their picks, period. And then we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that factor. And one is obviously, what's the deal? And what's that deal going to do for us, both for the rest of this season and long term? I think the other factor is, this is it. You trade the 27 and 29 picks. That is it. You are out of tradable draft picks for a long time. You will not be able to move another pick for a couple years, because you can only trade picks 7 years in advance from a season, and you can only, when you get into it, you can only trade picks every other year in there. So that's it. So the other thing is, not only is it what does it do for this year, next year, but it has to be absolutely the right deal, because this is your last chance. Otherwise, you're kind of out. If you move them and it doesn't go the way you want, well, guess what? Your trade chances went way down. At that point, you're looking at, we have to trade players we probably don't want to move. That's the only way we can kind of reset things at that point. So that's where I think you've got to exercise caution. You got to make sure where we really want to go with this. Question I have for you, because you're obviously way closer to this than I am. 3-game win streak right now. Very surprising win last night over the
Yeah.
Heat that I don't think anybody expected, especially after they announced LeBron wasn't going to play. Or does that get people thinking like, yeah, we got to do it. We got to move picks. We got to trade players and go all in. And I know there's always going to be some, right? There's always extremes on every end. Or are people still a little like, I know, like, hold on, like, what's the temperature of the fan base right now?
It's a bit of both. There are some fans that are saying, you know what? Well, you've got. I mean, this happens day one of the regular season, regardless of what's going on. Like if you lose, it's the sky is falling, season's over, forget it. All that kind of stuff. That's out
Regular
there, right?
season, that
But
happens.
yeah,
Preseason, summer
that
league. Come
preseason
on now.
that happens. Summer league that happens.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? But so there are still a lot of fans that are saying, well, you know what? Yeah, this team probably doesn't have it. Just hang on to your picks. Wait till summer. That's a lot of the kind of season's over crew, right? Where that's just the response. Season's over. It's done. That type of thing. Because look, let's face it, fans. It's going to be an emotional response. Something hurts you. What you want to do is you want to just projectile send that
Mhm.
thing away from you, right? So by saying season's over, that's we're just stepping away, and that's I'm going to send you away so you can't hurt me anymore. There's that's out there. There's also LeBron fans who are incensed, just beside themselves at how dare the organization do this to LeBron. They must trade everything that's not nailed down to help LeBron right now. That's a thing too, which there's obviously a lot of bias built in there because those picks have no value, zero value to them because once LeBron's gone, they're not going to be following the team at that point, most likely. So there's that element too. For the most part, though, just kind of general Lakers fans, you see a lot of, well, LeBron's played at an incredibly high level. Davis has played at an incredibly high level when he's been healthy. And it's hard to watch those guys play at such a high level and just not see them have enough help around them. So if you can find the right move, you have to look at it. You have to consider it. And I think that's ultimately where I land too, that it's got to be the right move. And that's where you're going to consider. If LeBron was having a poor season, if Anthony Davis wasn't looking good, then maybe you don't. But I think this is a group where LeBron and AD are both playing well enough to where if they're both healthy, and that's a big if, come playoff time, they could present a challenge for just about anybody in the first round if you're able to add a little bit of firepower to help get them there. So that's where I fall with it, where it's got to be the right move, but it's something you really have to consider because of how well they've played.
The last thing I'll close on this, outside of a handful of deals they could construct, it's very, very important to remember if you make the trade now, this is almost your big off-season
It's
move
your summer
too,
shopping.
because
Yep.
this is it. You've got either cap space this summer, or you've got obviously the big move would be has to involve moving Russ. Like that's really the only way you can get there. I know you can do Beverly and stack a couple other guys, but it's those are kind of your big guns if you're doing that with the trades and those kind of things, and that starts to become of all right, are we going all in with LeBron, AD, and whoever we get in this trade, and here we go moving forward like that's the other thing you got to factor in too, is this is your off season
Mm-hmm.
move as well as far as this goes.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Something that you have to consider. I've been saying to Lakers fans, whenever you look at a trade, it's not player X and Y and draft pick, first round pick for these players. It's player X, Y plus cap space for the summer that you're giving up. That's got to be factored into any kind of trade.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take a jump over here. The Charlotte Hornets actually not talking, according to the Hornets themselves, not talking extension or a new deal, I should say, with Miles Bridges. Now, this is fairly controversial. The Hornets caught a little bit of flack for potentially talking about a deal with him, and apparently, maybe not too pleased that this got out there.
Yeah, the Hornets actually issued a statement to the Charlotte Observer, a local paper, that they basically said we have not had any talks with Miles Bridges. Now that's a little odd. Generally,
Mm-hmm.
teams will basically no comment. We're not going to tell you if we've talked or not talked to somebody, or they'll give a very non-answer answer. This was a pretty definitive. Wasn't even a question being asked. It was a straight out statement to the reporters of no, we haven't talked extension. So, we're in a spot where that's interesting. And that kind of, was a little bit more definitive. And this could be, all right, this thing we floated the trial balloon through the media. It didn't go well. People got angry. They got real mad. And we're going to back off it a little bit. Or it could be a situation where it is, hey, well, wait a minute. We're not doing that. And that didn't come from us. And we're not interested at all in talking with him at the moment. So either way, now that they've said this, it'd be a little surprising, not entirely because it's the world of sports. If tomorrow there's a tweet of Hornets and Bridges agree to new contract, but I my guess is this isn't coming right now. We'll readdress later, probably, if anything, probably over the summer. Important to note, still a restricted free agent. They retain his restricted rights as they have, and part of the reason they did that was because, in my opinion, they didn't want anybody else just jumping in and saying, hey, we'll overlook what happened, or we'll look past it, or whatever it is. We'll move on. With this, I think it's the Hornets saying, no, we're going to control this because something happened here that it's to some extent up for debate because nothing's necessarily happened. But he did plead no contest, which isn't pleading not guilty. So that's, that's probably not great, but eventually Miles Bridges will play in the NBA again. We know this, whether you like it or not. That's going to be how this goes. But my guess is it's not this season for the Hornets.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he could just sign the offer that the Hornets put out there. That's possible. But I think even if tomorrow we wake up and there's news that they've come to terms on a deal or whatever, I'm not expecting to see him in the league this season because as soon as he signs a contract, the NBA is going to suspend him.
Suspension. Yeah, and it's going to be a long one too. It's going to be a lengthy one for sure. They the last closest thing was probably Jeffrey Taylor several years ago, and he got hit with a very lengthy extension as well. So yeah, it'd be a surprise if we see Miles Bridges.
All right, another bit on the trade market. Some are pegging the Raptors. We've talked a lot about the Bulls, the Wizards potentially being those teams that could flip to blow some things up. But are the Raptors actually the second domino after Noah Vonleh to fall on the trade market? Toronto currently sitting in 12th in the Eastern Conference, lost their last 2 games, negative point differential on the season. Are the Raptors right there with Chicago and Washington as a team that we should look at that could start trading away players here prior to the deadline?
Yeah, I think so. I think for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think Masai Ujiri plays the sit in the middle game. I don't think just being a play-in tournament team's enough for him or the Raptors. I think there will be changes made. They've got a couple key free agents coming up this summer too that they're going to have to figure out what do we want to do long term. And I think there's a sense of it sounded great to build this roster of a whole bunch of dudes that are between 6'6" and 6'9" that are all switchable and can do a bunch of different things, but none of them can really shoot. So that's become a major problem. Their guard play, when Van Vliet is out, is not good. Their front court guys are very good playmakers for front court players. They're not necessarily true offensive, keep the machine moving with this. The Raptors are closer to the number 1 overall pick in the draft right now, or being in that top 3 lottery, than they are to home court advantage in the East. Just to give you a sense of how far things are up. They're only 6.5 away from the Charlotte Hornets and Detroit Pistons, and they are 8.5 behind the Cleveland Cavaliers for the 4th spot. So tells you things aren't great. Now they're only just outside the play-in tournament, but again, I don't know that that's enough for them, and I struggle to see how they get much past that at this point.
Now, we had heard of them as being, a landing spot for Jakob Poeltl, landing spot for Miles Turner. Is that dead now, given the way the Raptors are at the moment?
I wouldn't say it's dead. I think it's probably maybe they do a reset where it's, hey, we're going to do a reset, and then all of a sudden we did this reset with the idea of a few of these guys aren't going to play the rest of this season, and we're going to kind of bottom this thing out and let it kind of all fall apart on us. We have seen teams do that in the past. That's kind of what the Wizards did a little bit last year with Kristaps Porzingis, right? They traded for him. Then it was, all right, we reset everything, but there's no intention of going all in and pushing hard the rest of the season. So I could see maybe something like that, but they're one way or another, whether it comes in the next month before the trade deadline or it comes in June, July, the Raptors are going to look very, very different. They're going to make major changes in Toronto. It's coming for sure.
Yeah, agreed. So certainly a team to keep an eye on as we get closer and closer to that trade deadline on February 9th. A few injury things just to round things out for us. Zion, man, out at least 3 weeks, then he'll be reevaluated dealing with that hamstring injury. We talked about it a little bit. I believe it was day before yesterday. Hamstrings can be super tricky. You got to be careful with it. But Pelicans are going to be missing him for a bit here. And I mean, given how compact the West is, it could be a 3-week injury could completely change the playoff landscape in the Western Conference. So hopefully he heals up and gets better soon. But for at least the next 3 weeks, possibly more, the Pelicans will be without Zion Williamson.
Yeah, you need to look no further than the Phoenix Suns, who have gone through a major injury to Devin Booker. Is it the same thing? No, his is a strained groin.
Yeah.
For him, but he's out, 2 to 4 weeks, I believe his was. And they've slipped all the way down to 9th, I think it is, in the conference now. So they've fallen quite a bit. And I think for Zion is he's had a history now of foot, knee, leg injuries. You're going to be very, very careful because you don't want this to turn into something else because he's compensating for it. Also, hamstrings are, if it's not ready and it pops again, then you could be out, very long. Hard thing for them too. Brandon Ingram's still not back. It sounds like he's finally doing a lot more on-court work and maybe getting a little closer. But one of the more recent reports I read was still having pain in the toe when he went to push off for things. And I know sometimes people laugh and be like, "Oh, poor guy is stubbed his toe," and that's not really what happened. But you spend a lot of time on your toes in basketball. You're pushing off the run, you're pushing off the jump, and those kind of things. And that's that's all part of it. So it's one of those things where I look at it and it's all right, man. You got to keep battling. You got to get through it because they're right there. They're half game behind Denver and Memphis at the top of the conference. But yeah, like you said, this could go south real quickly.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. We've got some positive news though out of Golden State, who has been not what we expected them to be in the Western Conference, but Steph Curry could be bouncing back here next week. That would be great to get him back in action. Obviously, for the Warriors, lost their last game. Has had some big performances out of Klay Thompson, but they certainly need Steph back.
Yeah, and you know what? If the Warriors get him back, kept their heads above water, gonna get Andrew Wiggins back, presumably sooner rather than later. Sounds like Jonathan Kuminga is going to be out for a little bit now. There, further need of got to get that depth figured out in Golden State. Something's got to come one way or another for the Warriors. But get Steph back, get Wiggins back. All of a sudden, your top 5 is there. Your top 6, if you throw Jordan Poole in the mix, and things start to look a lot better for that team. They and then we'll see, can they win a game or two away from home?
Right.
If they can do that, all of a sudden, then all right, it's tough. But they're above 500. So I mean, Steph gets back and you're at 500, right around 500. Like that's pretty good work. Then you hung in there, and they're only 2.5 out of home court advantage in the West, so it's all still right there for the Warriors.
Yeah, that's just it, right? They're right there. The West is still wide open, and Curry comes back and you get rolling. Great, you could be in pretty good shape. By the way, the Warriors, I believe it's the Warriors' entire starting 5 was on the early returns for
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
So things might, they might be sitting whatever it is, 9th right now, but things aren't that bad in Golden State. They're getting all those the All-Star love there.
Everybody's all about it. I know Kevon Looney was a lot higher than people were satisfied with. So yeah,
right.
that is definitely something I know for sure.
I saw my buddy Samus Fandiari of the Light Years Pod, which is a fellow Blue Wire podcast network show, was putting out there on Twitter like he's not worried about Austin Reeves over Jordan Poole or anything like that. He's just hoping to get Kevon Looney into the All-Star game again. He's pushing for that. We'll see if the Warriors fans can get it done. They made it happen with Andrew Wiggins last year, so who knows?
What they need to do is they need to tell the people of the great nation of Georgia that Kevon Looney is a Georgian, and
there you go.
He's Zaza Pachulia's long lost cousin, and get them all rallied behind him again too, and then they'll win the fan vote, and then it does become a little tricky to for the media and to overcome them. But yeah, that was also what triggered all of that. was
Yes.
the change to that was Zaza getting, I think all, and I mean all grandmothers and babies and infants and everyone every single day was voting multiple times a day for Zaza, and still somehow magically didn't squeak through into being named an all-star starter. Shockingly.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Beat out on the last day.
Crazy.
Very
Crazy.
weird how that happens.
Yeah. I have no idea. I'm sure nothing, underhanded happened in
No.
that, but we'll
That's a
wait.
whole nother pod. That's a
That
summer pod of NBA
that
conspiracy.
that is a middle of August
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah. NBA
For sure.
August. Yep.
All right, everybody. Let's wrap things up there. Appreciate everybody for joining us. Make sure you are subscribing to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. And don't forget to go follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, see ya and stay safe.